June 5th, 1944. The air in the cramped operations room of Station 53, tucked away in the rolling hills of Buckinghamshire, England, hung heavy with the scent of cigarette smoke and fresh ink. Rain pattered against the blackout curtains, a relentless drumbeat that mirrored the pulse of the men gathered around the scarred oak table. Colonel Jock McClure, his face etched with the lines of too many sleepless nights, leaned over a map strewn with pins and scribbled notations. His uniform jacket, unbuttoned at the collar, bore the faint insignia of the London Controlling Section, a ghost unit within a ghost force. You can almost feel the chill seeping through the cracks in the old stone walls, the weight of secrecy pressing down like the storm outside. McClure's fingers, calloused from years of handling signals gear, traced the outline of a phantom division on the paper. "Gentlemen," he said, his Scottish brogue cutting through the murmur of voices, "tonight we birth an army that never marches. Operation Fortitude South begins at 2200 hours. Across the table, Lieutenant Elias Thorne, a wiry signals officer fresh from Bletchley Park, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and nodded. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the caffeine surging through his veins after 18 hours on shift. The room buzzed with activity. Radiomen hunched over Enigma-inspired sets, their Morse code keys clicking like impatient insects, cartographers sketching inflatable tanks and dummy landing craft, and a cluster of actors. Yes, actors from the BBC, rehearsing scripted chatter to mimic the banter of frontline troops. The clock on the mantel ticked toward the witching hour. McClure straightened, his eyes scanning the faces around him. These were the unsung architects of deception, the R Force operatives whose whispers would echo across the channel. R for ruse, R for radio, R for the red herrings they were about to unleash on the Führer's high command. No parades for them, no medals pinned under the flash of cameras. Their battlefield was ink and ether, their weapons fabricated lies. As the rain intensified, drumming on the roof like distant artillery, Thorne flipped open his notebook. Inside, pages filled with coded dialogues. A sergeant complaining about soggy rations near Dover, a lieutenant barking orders for a non-existent build-up at Folkestone. "Make it real," McClure had instructed earlier that day, his voice low and urgent. "The Jerrys have ears everywhere. One slip and the whole house of cards topples." Thorne began tapping out the first transmission. Dot, dash, dot, the Morse for H in Highland Division, a fictional unit of Scots and English infantry poised to strike Pas de Calais instead of Normandy. The signal leapt into the night, bouncing off antennas disguised as church steeples aimed at German listening posts along the French coast. In his mind's eye, Thorne pictured the Abwehr interceptors in their bunkers, scribbling furiously, feeding the intel up the chain to Berlin. Meanwhile, in a nearby hangar shrouded by fog, Sergeant Miriam Hale supervised the inflation of the first decoys. At 32, she was one of the few women in R Force, her cover as a WAF mechanic, hiding her true role in crafting illusions. The acrid smell of rubber and glue filled the air as the bellows pumped life into a canvas tank, its plywood turrets swiveling awkwardly under the glow of shielded lanterns. "Steady on," she called to her team of RAF ground crew, their breaths visible in the damp chill. "This Sherman's got to fool a Luftwaffe spotter from 5,000 feet. The dummy vehicle slumped into shape, 20 tons of nothing masquerading as armor. Hale stepped back, wiping sweat from her brow despite the cold. These weren't toys. They were the bait in a grander trap. By dawn, fields around southeast England would bristle with hundreds like it. Trucks, artillery, even fake hospitals, photographed by Allied reconnaissance to leak via double agents. Back in the operations room, McClure paced, his boots scuffing the threadbare rug. The first replies trickled in from monitors. Faint acknowledgements from other R Force stations along the coast. "Traffic's building," one operator reported, his voice laced with exhaustion. Krauts are biting already, picking up our chatter on their Y-stations." McClure allowed himself a grim smile. It had taken months to orchestrate this symphony of deceit. From the ashes of earlier ops like mincemeat, the corpse with forged papers washing up in Spain, our force had evolved into the master illusionists of the Allied war machine. Their mandate, straight from Churchill's war cabinet, convince Hitler that the Normandy landings were a feint, that the real hammer blow would fall at Calais, the shortest crossing point. A door creaked open, admitting Captain Harold Jasper Reed, the unit's psychological warfare expert. Rain dripped from his trench coat as he shook it off. "Double agents are in play," he announced, spreading a dossier on the table. Garbo, the star turncoat, actually Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spanish chicken farmer turned MI5 asset, had already wired his German handlers with tales of troop concentrations. 15 divisions, plus the full might of the 1st U.S. Army Group under Patton himself, Reed read aloud, his tone mocking the absurdity. Patton, the firebrand general, was real enough, but his army was pure vapor. Thorne paused his keying, glancing up. The room felt alive now, electric with purpose. Outside, thunder rumbled as if the heavens approved, but doubt flickered in his chest. What if the deception failed? What if Rommel's Africa Corps veterans saw through the charade? He pushed the thought aside, resuming the rhythm. A platoon leader griping about delayed supplies, coordinates pinpointing phantom embarkation points. Hours blurred into the pre-dawn haze. By 0400, the map on the table had transformed, red lines snaking from England to Calais, blue arrows marking the diversions at Normandy. McClure lit another cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the strain in his eyes. "We've drawn the outline," he murmured to Reed. "Now we fill it with blood and thunder, on paper at least." As the first grey light pierced the curtains, a runner burst in, breathless. "Intercepts from Berlin, sir. They're mobilizing, shifting the 15th Army eastward, 15th Bloody Army, all because of our ghosts." The room erupted in quiet cheers, fists thumping the table. McClure raised his mug of cold tea and toast. "To the armies that never were, and to the madman who'll chase them to his doom." But in the shadows, Thorne wondered about the cost. Each fake signal was a thread in the web, pulling German divisions from the true beaches. Lives hung on these lies. Thousands of young men storming Omaha and Utah at H-hour. The rain eased, giving way to a tentative dawn, but the real storm brewed across the channel. Our force had lit the fuse. Now the world waited for the explosion. June 6, 1944. The salt-laced wind whipped across the Dover cliffs, carrying the faint rumble of engines from the assembly points below. You can taste the brine on your lips, feel the grit of chalk dust between your teeth as Sergeant Miriam Hale trudges through the muddy fields, her Wellington boots sinking into the sodden earth. Dawn has broken, pale and unforgiving, and casting long shadows over the deception sites that dot the southeast coast like a mirage made solid. Hale's breath fogs in the chill air, her WAF overalls smeared with grease from the night's work. She's been at it since the alarms woke her at 0200, directing teams to position the decoys under the cover of darkness. "Right, lads, shift that lorry 3 paces east," she calls, her voice steady despite the exhaustion gnawing at her bones. The men grunt in response, heaving a canvas-covered mock-up truck into place. It's a hulking thing, painted in drab olive with stenciled unit markings for the fictional 3rd Canadian Division. From the air, it fools the eye. Up close, it's a skeleton of wood and cloth, wheels replaced by sawhorses. Hale kneels to adjust a guy wire, her fingers numb from the cold. These illusions aren't just props. They're the visible half of our force's grand charade, designed to be spotted by Luftwaffe patrols and snapped by spy cameras. Further down the slope, near the faux harbour at Folkestone, Captain Harold Jasper Reed oversees the radio vans, their antennas poking skyward like skeletal fingers. The vehicles are camouflaged as troop transports, but inside they're hives of deception. Reed, his face shadowed by the brim of his service cap, leans into one, whispering adjustments to the script readers. Make the accents thicker. Yorkshire for the infantry, a bit of Geordie for the signals lads. Let it bleed into the ether like real scuttlebutt. The actors inside nod, their voices rising in rehearsed banter. Blimey, these Yanks think they're landing at Calais. Patton's boys'll show 'em how it's done. The transmissions pulse out, layered with static to mimic field conditions, feeding the narrative of a massive build-up for Operation Fortitude. Across the channel, in the dimly lit bunker of the Abwehr station at Cap Gris-Nez, Oberleutnant Karl Becker hunches over his receiver, the Morse code tattooing his eardrums like machine gun fire. The air reeks of damp concrete and stale coffee, the walls vibrating faintly from the distant boom of coastal guns. Becker, a veteran of the Eastern Front with a scarred cheek from Stalingrad, scribbles notes furiously. Another intercept. Highland Division signals increasing. Embarkation points confirmed at Dover and Ramsgate. His assistant, a young Gefreiter named Lucas, relays the wire to the teletype, the clatter echoing in the confined space. Becker pauses, rubbing his eyes. The volume of traffic is unnatural, a flood compared to the sporadic bursts from Normandy. "Send it up to Rommel's HQ, he orders, his voice laced with unease. "This smells like the real push." The message races through the Wehrmacht's nerve center, from coastal outposts to the Wolf's Lair in East Prussia. There, in the humid confines of the Führerbunker, Adolf Hitler stirs from a fitful sleep, his adjutant Friedrich Hossbach at his side. The room is a cocoon of maps and teleprinters, lit by the harsh glare of desk lamps. Hitler, his face pallid under the weight of amphetamines and doubt, snatches the flimsy report. "Pas de Calais," he mutters, his Austrian accent sharpening. "Eisenhower's feint at Normandy is confirmed. The main assault comes here. Patton will lead it." Hossbach nods, though his own intelligence whispers otherwise, but the Führer is adamant, his paranoia fueled by the deluge of reports from Garbo and other agents, all singing the same tune. Back in Buckinghamshire, Colonel Jock McClure receives the first aerial confirmation at 1100 hours. The operations room at Station 53 hums with renewed energy, the rain of the previous night replaced by a fitful sun filtering through the windows. Lieutenant Elias Thorne decodes the reconnaissance photos on the table. German fighters buzzing low over the decoy fields, their pilots radioing back descriptions that match our forces' fabrications to the letter. "They're buying it hook, line and sinker," Thorne says, his voice rising with a mix of relief and thrill. McClure claps him on the shoulder, the gesture rare for the stoic Scot. "Aye, lad, but we're not done. Ramp up the air ops, let 'em see our bombers staging." By midday, the skies over Kent fill with the drone of RAF Mosquitoes, towing target sleeves to simulate anti-invasion drills. On the ground, Hale's teams add the finishing touches, smoke pots belching black plumes to mimic idling engines, fake tracks churned into the mud by tractors. You can hear the low growl of the aircraft overhead, feel the vibration in your chest as they bank toward the sea. In a hidden copse, Sergeant Hale pauses to light a cigarette, her hands steady now. "One good photo," she thinks, and Rommel shifts another Panzer division our way. In Berlin, the High Command convenes in the Reich Chancellery's war room, a cavern of polished oak and flickering projectors. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, his monocle glinting, pores over the intercepts alongside General Alfred Jodl. "The 15th Army must hold Calais at all costs," von Rundstedt declares, his voice gravelly from years of command. "Eisenhower's deception is clever, but our agents confirm the build-up. Shift the 1st SS Panzer from reserve. Reinforce the Pas-de-Calais defences." Jodl hesitates, glancing at the Normandy reports, sparse and contradictory. but Hitler's directive arrives via secure line. No withdrawals. The invasion at Normandy is a diversion. Calais is the prize. The order ripples out, trucks and tanks grinding northward along French roads, away from the beaches where the real armada gathers. In the R Force room, Captain Reed monitors the double-agent feedback. Garbo's latest message, crafted in a safe house in London, claims troop morale is high, but logistics strained. Details pulled from Thorne's scripts. "Berlin's swallowing it whole," Reed reports, a wry smile cracking his fatigue-lined face. McClure nods. But his eyes betray the tension. The deception is a tightrope, one loose wire, and it all unravels. As evening falls, Thorne resumes his keying, the Morse now weaving tales of Patton's ghost army drilling under floodlights. The clicks fill the room, a hypnotic rhythm. Outside, the cliffs stand sentinel, the channel a slate-grey expanse hiding the true fleet. Hale, back at her hangar, packs away the bellows, the decoys standing sentinel in the twilight. The wind carries whispers of tomorrow. D-Day dawns, and the ghosts march on, drawing steel from the wrong shore. But in the quiet moments, doubt lingers like fog. How long can paper armies hold back the tide? June 7th, 1944. The sun hangs low over the English countryside, painting the deception fields in hues of gold and shadow. But the air still carries the bite of early summer chill. You can smell the damp earth rising from the furrows where Sergeant Miriam Hale's teams have labored through the night. Their boots caked in mud as they reposition the dummies under the watchful eyes of circling reconnaissance planes. Hale wipes her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of grease across her skin, and surveys the scene. Rows of inflatable landing craft bob gently in a mock harbour at Hythe, their canvas hulls slapping against wooden pilings that mimic concrete piers. Nearby, fake barrage balloons drift lazily, tethered to stakes driven deep into the soil, their fabric humming faintly in the breeze like distant whispers. Keep those smoke generators primed. Hale orders a cluster of RAF auxiliaries, her voice cutting through the low drone of a passing Spitfire on patrol. The men nod, adjusting the pots that belch plumes of oily black fog, simulating the exhaust from idling engines of an invasion fleet. It's all part of the escalation, our forces' orders to intensify the visual spectacle now that the Normandy landings have begun in earnest. From afar, the site looks alive with preparation, canvas trucks lined up as if waiting for orders, plywood artillery pieces pointed seaward, even scattered supply dumps of burlap sacks filled with straw. Hale knows the Luftwaffe spotters are out there, their Focke-Wulfs slicing through the clouds, cameras clicking to capture proof for Berlin. One clear shot, and another Panzer division stays glued to the Pas de Calais. Miles inland, at Station 53, the operations room pulses with a feverish rhythm, the air thick with the tang of sweat and cooling machinery. Lieutenant Elias Thorne hunches over his Morse key, his fingers a blur, as he hammers out the next layer of the deception. The lamp above casts harsh shadows on his face, highlighting the dark circles under his eyes. He hasn't slept since D-Day broke. Echo Charlie 7, confirm resupply for Baker Company at grid 2345. He taps, the code embedding coordinates for a phantom ammunition depot near Margate. The signal arcs across the channel, intercepted by German Y stations that have multiplied their listening watches since the first paratroopers hit Normandy soil. Colonel Jock McClure stands behind him, arms crossed, his pipe clenched between his teeth, though it's unlit to avoid stray sparks near the equipment. Good work, Thorne. Layer in some panic now. Make it sound like the Jerry's counterstrikes are rattling the lads. McClure's brogue is gravelly from chain smoking, but his eyes burn with focus. The room is a hive. Operators relaying feedback from double agents, cartographers updating the master map with fresh pins marking German troop shifts. Red arrows snake northward, away from Caen and the Bocage country where the real fight rages. Reports from Schaff confirm it. The 15th Army, over 150 men strong, sits idle in the Calais sector. Its divisions, like the 352nd Infantry and the 116th Panzer, held back by the spectre of Patton's ghost army. Captain Harold Jasper Reed bursts through the door, clutching a sheaf of decrypts, his trench coat still buttoned against the morning dew. Garbo's just filed another report, claims the Normandy assault is drawing off reserves from the main force at Dover. Berlin's lapping it up. They're even pulling coastal guns from Le Havre to bolster Calais batteries. Reed spreads the papers on the table, his fingers tracing the fabricated details. Troop strengths inflated by 20,000, landing craft counts tripled, all funneled through the Spanish agent's channels. It's a masterpiece of misdirection. Garbo's wires timed to arrive just after ultra-intercepts show Hitler's indecision. Thorn pauses, flexing his cramped hand, and glances at the wall clock. 14:30 hours. Outside, the hills of Buckinghamshire roll green and serene, a stark contrast to the chaos they're conjuring. You can hear the faint crackle of the receivers, picking up German acknowledgements, fragmented replies from Abwehr outposts, their operators scrambling to verify the flood of Allied traffic. In one corner, a BBC actor rehearses a new script, his voice adopting a Cockney lilt. Bloody Krauts bombed the pier last night, lost 2 gliders worth of kit. Patton's furious, says we'll hit 'em at Calais by week's end. The words will soon flood the airwaves, mimicking the disorganized chatter of a staging army under strain. Across the water, in the fortified command post at Saint-Vaast-la-Hougue, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel pores over reconnaissance photos under the flicker of a petrol lantern. The room smells of mildew and gun oil, maps pinned to the walls fluttering in the draught from a ventilation shaft. Rommel, his desert-tanned face gaunt from the drive back from Normandy inspections, jabs a finger at the images. Blurry shots of decoy tanks clustered near Ashford, smoke rising from faux railheads. This is no feint, he snaps to his chief of staff, General Hans Speidel. Eisenhower's pinning us down at Bayeux while the hammer falls here. Speidel shifts uncomfortably, citing sparse reports from the Normandy front. Omaha Beach a bloodbath, but the Allies pushing inland. Yet Rommel's instincts, honed in the sands of Tobruk, scream deception. He wires Berlin, request immediate transfer of the 21st Panzer Division to Pas-de-Calais reserves. The reply comes swift, approved, per Führer directive. In the Wolf's Lair, the tension coils tighter. Adolf Hitler paces the conference room, his boots echoing on the wooden floor, the air heavy with the scent of pine from the surrounding forest. Adjutants hover like shadows, teleprinters chattering incessantly. The Normandy landings are a probe, a spoiling attack, Hitler declares, his voice rising to a rasp as he slams a fist on the table. General Alfred Jodl, standing rigid in his grey uniform, presents the latest Abwehr summary, signals traffic from southeast England at peak levels, double-agent confirmations aligning with aerial sightings. Patton commands the 1st U.S. Army Group, 200 men, 500 ships. They cannot sustain 2 invasions. Hitler nods fiercely, his eyes wild. Hold the 15th Army in place. No redeployments to Normandy until Calais is secure. The Allies bleed us there. We crush them here. The order cascades down. Panzers rumble along the autoroutes. Infantry dig deeper entrenchments along the Calais cliffs. Flak batteries repositioned to guard against the Phantom fleet. In the R-Force hangar, Hale's team works feverishly as dusk falls, inflating a new batch of dummy gliders. Lightweight frames draped in silk scattered across meadows to suggest paratroop assembly. The whoosh of air fills the space, mingling with the laughter of exhausted crewmen sharing a flask of tea. If this doesn't pull their eyes east, Hale mutters to a corporal, nothing will. He grins, but his eyes hold the same quiet fear that gnaws at Thorn back at the station. By nightfall, the transmissions peak. Thorn's key sings of urgent reinforcements, scripted delays in embarkation due to Jerry saboteurs. McClure monitors from the window, the countryside now dotted with blackout lights. Reed joins him, lighting a cigarette. "We've bought Eisenhower 2 days, maybe 3, but Rommel's no fool. He's sniffing the wind." McClure exhales smoke, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dark. The ghosts are marching, drawing blood without spilling a drop of their own. Yet as the stars prick the sky, the weight settles. Each shifted division saves lives on the Normandy beaches, but the deception frays with every hour. In the distance, the Channel murmurs, carrying the faint thunder of the real war, where paper armies meet flesh and steel. June 8th, 1944. The fog clings to the Kentish marshes like a shroud, muting the world into greys and whites as Sergeant Miriam Hale picks her way along the dew-slicked path to the deception site at Romney Marsh. You can feel the squelch of peat under your boots, the chill dampness seeping through woolen socks, carrying the earthy tang of salt and decay from the nearby coast. Hale's breath comes in visible puffs, her wharf cap pulled low against the mist that beads on her lashes. It's been 36 hours since the first waves hit Normandy, and her teams have barely paused, repositioning decoys by lantern light, feeding false fuel to the smoke machines that now choke the air with diesel haze, mimicking the frenzy of an armada revving for launch. "Easy with that barrage balloon tether," she warns a young auxiliary, his face smudged with soot as he hauls on the rope. The balloon sways upward, a bloated sentinel joining others that bob like buoys in a sea of grass, their cables humming in the faint breeze. Below them, the field bristles with invention. Inflatable landing craft clustered in shallow ponds dug overnight, their rubber sides rippling as if riding choppy waves. Mock troop carriers of layered canvas and scaffolding, stenciled with the insignia of the non-existent British 55th Division. Even faux radar vans, their dishes fashioned from wire mesh and painted sheet metal, pulsing with dummy signals to jam imaginary Luftwaffe probes. Hale kneels by one, adjusting a valve to release a hiss of steam, simulating engine warm-up from 1,000 feet up. Through the fog breaks, it screams invasion imminent, pulling German eyes and guns to the wrong shore. Inland, at the camouflage nerve center near Ashford, Captain Harold Jasper Reed coordinates the aerial layer from a canvas tent that smells of wet canvas and machine oil. The flap rustles as he ducks inside, shaking droplets from his coat, and spreads a fresh set of overlays on the plotting table. Mosquitoes report heavy Jerry recon today, Fokker Wolfs hugging the clouds, snapping pics of our little theatre, he says to the glider pilots lounging on crates, their flight suits zipped against the cold. Reed's voice carries the clipped efficiency of a man who's traded stage lights for shadows, his psychological ops background turning every decoy into a scripted scene. "We'll give 'em a show. Low passes over the dummy airfields at Manston. Drop those sleeve targets. Make it look like we're prepping for paratroop runs on Calais." The pilots nod, draining mugs of bitter tea before climbing into their waiting tugs, modified Ansons with reinforced booms. As engines cough to life, the ground vibrates, scattering birds from the hedgerows. You can taste the aviation fuel on the wind, sharp and acrid, as the planes lumber into the mist, towing their fabric ribbons to draw flak and confirm the ruse. Reed watches them vanish, then turns to his radio operator. Cue the chatter, have the ground crews panic about fuel shortages. Let it leak that Patton's delaying the push to regroup. Back at Station 53 in Buckinghamshire, the operations room feels like a pressure cooker, the air stale with unwashed bodies and the ozone hum of teleprinters. Lieutenant Elias Thorne's fingers ache from the relentless Morse, but he pushes on, the key under his hand, clicking out a tale of logistical snags. Alpha 9 to command. Supply convoy delayed by minefields at grid 1422. Request air cover for reroute to Folkestone. The dots and dashes fly, encrypted just enough to seem authentic, laced with deliberate errors to mimic battle fatigue. Thorne's glasses fog briefly from the heat of the lamp. He wipes them on his sleeve, glancing at Colonel Jock McClure, who paces like a caged wolf, his unlit pipe tapping against his palm. Intercepts show Rommel's biting harder, McClure growls, halting to jab at the map where fresh intelligence pins cluster around Pas de Calais. Chef briefs confirm the deception's bite. The 15th Army's artillery brigades, including the dreaded 88mm flak guns, redeployed eastward overnight, stripping Normandy's defences bare. Over 200 000 troops, enough to crush the beachheads, languish in bunkers from Boulogne to Dunkirk, their panzers idling on French soil while Allied Shermans claw inland from Golden Juno. McClure's eyes, red-rimmed from staring at decrypts, meet Thorne's. "We've got them chasing shadows, lad, but Hitler's paranoia is our ally and our curse. He might hold too tight or snap too soon." A runner slips in, delivering a pouch from Bletchley. Ultra reveals Hitler's latest ravings, fixated on the ghost of Patton. Thorne decodes a snippet aloud, his voice steady, despite the knot in his gut. In the Wolf's Lair, the Führer had ranted to his generals, convinced the Normandy diversion was Montgomery's ploy to mask the main thrust under Ike's command. Patton's army masses at Dover, 15 divisions the lot. No retreat from Calais until they break on our Atlantic wall. The order stood, no shifting the 1st SS Panzer Corps south, despite Rommel's pleas from his forward HQ. Across the channel, in the salt-crusted command bunker at Pas de Calais, Oberleutnant Karl Becker pores over the latest aerial mosaics, the room lit by the green glow of signal lamps. The concrete walls echo with the drip of condensation, the air thick with cigarette haze, as he and his team dissect the photos. Endless lines of tanks near Deal, barracks, buzzing with activity, smoke trails suggesting frantic loading. Becker's scarred face tightens. He's seen real build-ups in Russia, the thunder of T-34s. This feels off, too neat, too staged. But the volume overwhelms doubt. Wire OKW. Allied staging confirmed. Recommend immediate fortification of beach obstacles. His Gefreiter nods, tapping the message out, the keys clacking like bones. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, racing back from a Normandy inspection in his Horch-Staff car, receives the relay at a roadside HQ near Caen. The engine ticks cooling outside as he spreads the prints on the hood. The bocage hedges rustling in the wind, carrying distant gunfire. Rommel's eyes narrow under his peaked cap, his gloved hand tracing the phantom concentrations. Eisenhower plays a deep game, he mutters to Speidel, who stands by with a thermos of ersatz coffee. The beachheads hold, Omaha secured at terrible cost, Utah pushing toward Cherbourg, but reserves trickle in too slowly. Rommel knows the math. Without the 15th Army's full might, Normandy could crack open. Yet Hitler's cables bind him. Calais is the key. Trust the agents. Garbo speaks truth. Rommel complies, ordering the 116th Panzer Division to dig in along the Calais approaches, their tracks churning mud away from the real fight. In London, Garbo, Juan Pujol Garcia in his MI5 flat, crafts his next dispatch under Reed's guidance, the room dimmed against prying eyes. The Spaniard's pen scratches across notepaper, weaving tales of strained supply lines and Patton's impatience, time to arrive post-intercept. The deception holds, Reed had wired earlier, and Garcia smiles faintly, knowing his fabrications have already diverted 2 Panzer Corps. By late afternoon, as the fog lifts to reveal a watery sun, Thorne's transmissions evolve, feigned setbacks, like a sunk dummy ship off Ramsgate, to suggest the invasion force weathering U-boat attacks. In the Air Force tent at Ashford, Reed monitors the feedback, Luftwaffe sightings spiking, flak bursts over decoy sites. Hale's teams, drenched and weary, add pyrotechnics, flares popping to simulate night drills, drawing night fighters like moths. McClure gathers his core team as evening deepens, the room's single bulb casting long shadows. 2 days in, And we've pinned 9 divisions, more than we dreamed. Thorne rubs his wrists, the weight of lives saved mingling with the fear of unraveling. Outside, the marshes whisper secrets to the tide, the channel a barrier where ghosts and steel collide. Reed lights a cigarette, exhaling slowly. Hitler's fighting phantoms, but phantoms tire. We push till the line holds. The map gleams under the light, red lines a testament to ink-drawn victories. But the night air carries the faint echo of Normandy's guns, a reminder that deception buys time, not eternity. June 9th, 1944. The dawn breaks sluggish over the deception fields of East Anglia, a watery light filtering through the haze as Sergeant Miriam Hale shoulders her kit bag and trudges toward the mock airfield at Martlesham Heath. You can feel the crunch of gravel underfoot, the persistent drizzle soaking through your collar, turning the world into a blurred watercolor of greens and greys. Hale's overalls cling uncomfortably, patched with mud from the night's frantic adjustments, her hair escaping its pins to stick damply to her neck. The air hums with the low thrum of idling generators, powering the floodlights that had burned till 300. Casting eerie glows over the plywood runways lined with fake Spitfires, their fuselages, bloated inflatables propped on sawhorses, wings sagging slightly under the weight of simulated armaments. "Secure those propellers! Make 'em spin like the real McCoy!" Hale barks to her crew, who wrestle with wind-up mechanisms hidden in the engine housings. The decoys must look operational, ready for the paratroop drops that our force scripts claim are imminent, drawing Luftwaffe raids to waste fuel on shadows. Nearby, a cluster of dummy C-47 transports huddles under camouflage netting, their canvas skins painted with invasion stripes that gleam wetly in the half-light. Hale pauses to light a soggy cigarette, inhaling deeply. The smoke mixes with the oily reek from the smoke pots, now stoked higher to simulate taxiing aircraft. From the air, through breaks in the overcast, it paints a picture of frantic preparation. The ghost 1st U.S. Army Group coiling for the strike at Calais, Patton's phantom legions poised to shatter the Atlantic Wall. Further south, in the bowels of Station 53, the operations room reeks of stale coffee and unvented tension, the walls papered with intercept logs that curl at the edges from the humidity. Lieutenant Elias Thorne slumps over his console, his Morse key worn smooth from days of ceaseless tapping, each sequence a thread in the web of lies. The bulb overhead flickers as he encodes the morning's dispatch. Zulu 4 to Sector Command. Paratroop manifests complete for Operation Bodyguard Phase 2. Embarkation at 1800. Expect heavy flak en route to Calais drop zones. Dots and dashes pulse out, the rhythm hypnotic, designed to overload German listeners with volume. Over 300 false messages per hour now, mimicking the chaos of a division in motion. Thorne's back aches, a dull fire from the unyielding stool, but he doesn't falter. Every signal is a lifeline for the boys clawing through hedgerows in Normandy. Colonel Jock McClure looms in the doorway, his frame silhouetted against the corridor's dim emergency lighting, a fresh mug of tea steaming in his grip. "Ultras singing our tune," he announces, his Scottish burr roughened by fatigue. Hitler's doubled down, ordered the 12th SS Panzer from Belgium to Calais reserves. That's another 20 Zero men off Montgomery's flank. The room stirs, operators exchanging nods amid the clatter of typewriters. McClure crosses to the central map, pinning a new marker. The 15th Army's full complement now immobilized. Its 19 divisions, over 200 Zero troops, 1,000 artillery pieces, chained to the narrow strip from Ostend to Le Havre. Schaeff estimates confirm the miracle. Without those reinforcements, the Normandy bridgehead expands daily, Sherman's breaking through at Villa Bocage, while the ghosts hold the line unseen. Captain Harold Jasper Reed enters with a rustle of papers, his eyes sharp behind wire frames despite the shadows beneath. Garbo's latest claims a weather delay on the main crossing, buying us another day of build-up chatter. He spreads the decrypts, detailing how the double agent from his London bolthole has fed Berlin tales of strained harbours and mutinous Yanks, all corroborated by Thorne's radio traffic. Reed's voice drops, confiding to McClure, "Rommel's wiring doubts, but the Führer's blind to it. Paranoia glues the divisions in place." Outside, the rain patters on the slate roof, a soothing counterpoint to the inner storm. You can almost taste the relief in the air, mingled with the fear that one crack in the facade could summon the Panzers south. Across the channel, in the steel-reinforced depths of the Pas de Calais fortress at Cap d'Antifer, Oberleutnant Karl Becker wipes condensation from his binoculars, scanning the slate-grey sea through a slit embrasure. The bunker vibrates with the rumble of arriving convoys, trucks disgorging fresh conscripts from the Reich, their faces pale under steel helmets as they stack sandbags around gun emplacements. The air tastes of brine and cordite, the walls slick with spray from the crashing waves below. Becker's team huddles around a radio set, transcribing the latest intercepts. Frantic Allied signals about delayed LSTs off Dover, coordinates pinpointing embarkation points that align perfectly with the aerial photos flooding in from Ju-88s. "It's building to a crescendo," Becker mutters, his Stalingrad scar itching in the damp. Doubt gnaws. He's urged his superiors to probe Normandy harder, but the orders from OKW are ironclad. Fortify here. Ignore the feint across the bay. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, ensconced in his forward command post amid the orchards of Bayeux, feels the noose tightening. The room, a requisitioned farmhouse with maps tacked to whitewashed walls, smells of apples rotting in the loft and the sharp tang of gun cleaner. Rommel paces, his boots scuffing the rush mats, gloved hands clenched as he reviews the dispatches. Normandy bleeds, Utah Beach secured, but Caen resists like a thorn. Yet reserves dwindle. "The English Channel lies," he snaps to General Speidel, who sips coffee laced with schnapps against the chill. Recon photos show endless tank parks in Kent, radio traffic swelling like a tide. Rommel wires Berlin again. Urgent request for 21st Panzer redeployment. The reply crackles back. Denied. Führer insists Calais primary threat. Patton's army masses hold fast. In the wolf's lair, the forest presses close, the bunker's air thick with the scent of damp earth and heated wires from the communications array. Adolf Hitler hunches over the situation table, his fingers trembling as he rearranges lead markers. The room's harsh lights carving hollows in his cheeks. Adjutant Hossbach stands by, relaying the morning brief. Abwehr confirms 18 divisions opposite Pas de Calais, signals indicating Patton's push within 48 hours. "Eisenhower's trick is exposed," Hitler snarls, his voice a whip crack echoing off the concrete. "Normandy pins our veterans. The real blow shatters here. No division stirs. Commit the reserves to the ghosts if need be." General Jodl protests mildly, citing beachhead gains, but Hitler's eyes blaze, fueled by Garbo's poisoned reports and the deluge of faked intel. The order flies. Reinforce the 15th Army with Luftwaffe field divisions. Flak towers rising like teeth along the coast. Panzers grind into position, away from the bocage where Allied infantry inches forward, buying meters with blood. Back in England, as midday sun pierces the clouds, Hale's teams escalate the spectacle. Pyrotechnic bursts simulating anti-air drills, drawing a skirmish of Me-109s that strafe the decoys, wasting ordnance on canvas. In the hangar, she oversees the patching of damaged props, her crew laughing grimly at the irony. Ghosts drawing real fire. At Station 53, Thorne weaves in reports of Jerry saboteurs hitting supply lines, his key a lifeline pulsing across the waves. McClure gathers the shift for a brief respite. T-rounds circulating as Reed tallies the toll, 12 divisions diverted, Normandy's flank exposed. "We've turned ink to iron," McClure toasts quietly. But his gaze lingers on the map's thinning blue lines, the real front straining under the weight. By evening, the transmissions crescendo. feigned triumphs, like a successful raid on Calais batteries to lure more probes. Reed monitors from the window. The hills fading to twilight. Thorne's hand cramps, but he persists. The clicks a dirge for the deceived. Hale, back at base, gleans her tools under lantern light, the rain resuming its tattoo. The deception peaks, Hitler's armies dancing to our forces' tune, but cracks whisper in the wind, Rommel's doubts mounting, a single true signal enough to shatter the illusion. In the distance, Normandy's thunder rolls closer, the ghosts march nearing its end. Time's fragile gift fraying at the edges. June 10th, 1944. The midnight sky over the Dover Straits stretches vast and starless. A velvet canopy pierced only by the winking lights of distant barrage balloons that drift like silent guardians. You can hear the ceaseless lap of waves against the chalk cliffs, carrying the faint, acrid bite of salt and gunpowder from across the channel, where the real thunder of war rumbles without cease. Sergeant Miriam Hale stands at the edge of the deception field near Folkestone, her breath misting in the cool night air, hands buried deep in the pockets of her oilskin coat. The ground beneath her squelches softly, pocked with the ruts of recent maneuvers. Fake tracks, churned by tractors to mimic the tread of endless columns. Around her, the illusions hold firm. Clusters of inflatable Shermans huddled under netting, their rubber tracks glistening with dew. Mock landing craft beached on shingles scraped from nearby quarries, their hulls scarred with painted shell hits to suggest recent drills gone awry. Hale's team works in hushed efficiency under shielded torches, repositioning a battery of dummy 25-pounders. Their wooden barrels pointed seaward like accusatory fingers. Ease it left, align with the grid for the morning flyover, she murmurs to a corporal, her voice low to avoid echoing off the water. The night's chill seeps into her bones, but adrenaline keeps her sharp. Reports from Schaeff whisper that the Normandy lodgement widens, Caen teetering under Montgomery's push. All thanks to the divisions our force has chained to this coast. She glances eastward, where the Pas de Calais looms invisible in the dark, its bunkers brimming with the 15th Army's might. Ghosts fighting ghosts, while real blood soaks the Norman sands. Deeper inland, in the fortified bowels of Station 53, the operations room throbs with a weary intensity. The air heavy with the metallic tang of overheated valves and the sour edge of unwashed urgency. Lieutenant Elias Thorne's fingers, blistered and raw, dance across the Morse key one final time for the shift, etching out the crescendo of the ruse. Victor India 6 to High Command. Patton's vanguard embarks at 400. Expect saturation bombing prelude to H-hour Calais. The signal surges forth, a deliberate overload laced with static bursts to evoke jammed frequencies and frantic relays. Thorne leans back, rubbing his eyes behind fog glasses, the console's green glow etching lines on his face like war paint. 3 nights without proper sleep have blurred the edges of reality. Every click feels like a prayer, buying hours for the boys on Sword Beach. Colonel Jock McClure hovers nearby, his silhouette gaunt against the map wall, where red pins form a fortress of deception. 19 divisions immobilized, panzers like the elite 2nd SS Das Reich diverted to phantom fronts. "That's the lot for tonight, lad," he says, his brogue softened by exhaustion as he claps Thorne's shoulder. The room hums with winding down activity, operators logging intercepts, a cartographer erasing obsolete notations. McClure lights his pipe at last, the tobacco's rich smoke curling upward, a small rebellion against the blackout. Ultra-decrypts pile on the desk, Hitler's latest tirade, refusing Rommel's desperate pleas to unleash reserves, convinced the Calais hammer falls imminently. "We've bled the beast dry," McClure mutters, exhaling a plume that dances in the lamplight. 9 days of shadows, and Normandy breathes. Captain Harold Jasper Reed, slips in from the adjoining cipher room, his arms laden with fresh dispatches, the door creaking on its hinges. Rain from an earlier squall drips from his cap as he shakes it off, spreading the papers with a flourish. Garbo's swan song wires Berlin that the weather's turning, delaying the main assault by 72 hours. But he's hinting doubts now, planting seeds for the wind down. Reed's eyes gleam with the actor's satisfaction. His scripts have turned chicken farmers into saviors, fictions into fact. The double agent's final messages, timed to perfection, report casualties from U-boat strikes on the Ghost Fleet, easing the pressure without snapping the thread. Thorne nods, the knot in his chest loosening fractionally. Outside, the Buckinghamshire woods whisper under the breeze, a deceptive peace masking the storm they've unleashed. Far across the water, in the labyrinthine command complex at Margiville, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stares at the flickering field telephone, the line crackling with static from Berlin. The air in the railcar bunker tastes of diesel fumes and despair, maps strewn across the table like fallen leaves, illuminated by a swinging lantern that sways with the train's idle rock. Rommel's face, lined deeper by the Normandy grind, tightens as Hitler's voice rasps through the receiver. The feint holds, no reserves to Normandy. Patton's divisions cross at dawn, crush them on the beaches. Rommel protests, his words clipped. Omaha's survivors pushed toward Carrington, Gold Beach spilling inland, the Allies' air umbrella smothering his panzers. But the Führer rages on, Garbo's reports and the radio deluge blinding him to the truth. Rommel slams the handset down, turning to Speidel, whose face mirrors his own frustration. "We're fighting air," Rommel growls, jabbing at recon photos of Kent's teeming armies. The 116th Panzer idles in Calais mud, its crews cursing the weight as Bocage battles rage without them. Doubt festers. Rommel senses the ruse, but chains bind him. In the Wolf's Lair's stifling conference chamber, Adolf Hitler slumps in his chair, the pine-panelled walls closing in like a tomb, the air thick with the sweat of aides and the buzz of teletype machines. His hands shake as he clutches a summary from Jodl. Signals peak at Dover, aerial confirms of endless columns, agents unanimous on the main thrust. "Eisenhower bleeds for Calais," Hitler whispers, his eyes feverish. "Amphetamine haze clouding judgment." Von Rundstedt urges caution, but the Führer waves him off, ordering the last Luftwaffe squadrons to patrol the Narrows, flak batteries primed for the Phantom Armada. The 15th Army digs deeper, over 200, Uyozaran souls and steel diverted. Enough to have sealed Normandy's fate, now squandered on paper foes. Hossbach watches silently, the room's tension coiling like a spring. Hitler's delusion, forged in our force's forge, fractures the Wehrmacht's spine. Back at the cliffs, Hale's crew douses the last lanterns as false dawn pales the horizon, the decoys standing sentinel one more night. She lingers, gazing seaward, the channels murmur a lullaby of what-ifs. In Station 53, McClure dismisses the watch, Thorne collapsing onto a cot, the Morse keys echo fading in his dreams. Reed pockets the final scripts, a quiet triumph in his step. By noon, chafe cables arrive. The bridgehead holds, Caen falls in days, the ghosts victorious. Our force fades into shadow, their ink armies dissolving as real legions march free. But in the quiet, Hale wonders at the cost, the lives spared, the illusions etched eternal. The wind shifts, carrying Normandy's echo, a world remade by whispers on the wire.